Hey everyone, so I am back with another Superpower Saturday video, and today's video is super important, especially to me, because it's super relatable to me and something that I have struggled with, and I think everyone watching this, anyone who wants to better themselves, who's consciously taking steps into bettering themselves and becoming a better human being, they've gone through this. You have to have. Today's video is important because it's about finding the balance between bettering yourself, but also leaving room for you to mess up. We often set the bar so completely ridiculously high for ourselves in the beginning of our self-love, self-bettering journey. Listen, I'm a human being, you're a human being if you're watching this. We all mess up. Oprah messes up. Beyonce messes up. We all mess up. It's human to mess up, and we can't have the bar set so high for ourselves, especially in the beginning of our journey, because at the end of the day, it's human to mess up, and some of our most important lessons come from moments of when we mess up. Some of my most favorite character traits about myself came from times where I messed up or from times where I was low. That is where growth occurs. If you follow me on Instagram and you've been watching my Insta stories every now and then, you know that I've been taking an online course by a woman named Nur, who happens to be one of my favorite human beings of all fucking time. I'm going to leave a link to her YouTube page in the description box, so please check her out, subscribe to her, show her love. Honestly, a huge amount of what I've learned about myself came from her teachings, came from her videos, it came from the way she thinks about things. I feel like she thinks about things really differently, and I think I see myself in her through that. It's hard to explain, but the world, like I said in my last video, everything has to do with your mentality, and she has a way of breaking things down into like little bite-sized digestible pieces, and then it makes you understand things so much better, and you start to go through life and see things differently, all because of the way you think now. It never ceases to amaze me that the mind has control over everything. In the course, I heard Nur say that if you're lost in life, that is the perfect place to be, and I completely agree with that statement. I agree because if you're lost, that means that you've stopped listening to what other people want you to do for the most part, and you're just at a place where it's like, I want to be happy. That is where you need to be to make change. You can't be thinking that you're perfect and that there's no room for growth if you want to change. If you want to change, you have to be at a point where it's like, I'm lost, like I want to know what's happening next with my life, I want to know where I should be going. That's the perfect place to be. Also, like before and like always, if I look down at my computer, it's because I'm reading content. I'm piggybacking off of my notes. Something I struggled with for years, and I still struggle with to an extent, but it's gotten way better because I can talk myself out of it, was lack of sympathy. Because the bar was set so high for myself, whenever I would mess up, whether it's financially, whether it's cutting off a friend, whatever the case may be, whenever I would mess up, I would be so hard on myself, which defeats the whole purpose of self-love. And in reality, when you look at the situation, of course I'm gonna mess up. You have to look back at your childhood. You have to look back at your experiences. The same way you learn negative habits is the same way you learn love. These things are taught to you. You're not born being a fuck up. You're really not. I would be so unhappy with my actions or my lack of this or that so much negative self-talk would occur. It's important to be realistic with yourself. You're not gonna go from a super damaged person that has a lot of healing to do to Oprah overnight. It's just not gonna happen. But that doesn't mean you don't check yourself when you mess up. So like I said, that's what this video is about. It's really about finding that balance. It's really about finding that balance. When there's a problem in your life and there's a situation where you feel like you should have done better, there's a way to effectively check yourself, and I'm gonna teach you guys that way. So what works for me personally, I find that writing the situation down helps me confront the issue. Like, what's making me mad? Why am I ashamed of myself? After you get down to the root of the issue and everything that's bothering you, you write, okay, so what can I do to make sure that this never happens again? So let me give you guys a personal example. About maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I had a friend who, they weren't a bad person, they just weren't benefiting me in any way, shape, or form. And they weren't a bad person, but there was a lot of negativity that I picked up from just being around them. They weren't on the same path as me, and at the same time, they didn't really respect my path, my growth, my personal evolution. That's not something that they, I guess, understood. So, you know, and you guys will see this, when you're growing and when you're changing, the way your friends and people around you react can be mind-blowing. Because you kind of assume that everyone wants to better their lives, but that's just not the reality. Some people want to grow, some people want to change, and some people are stuck in their ways, and some people will start growing 5 years, 10 years later. Everyone's personal evolution is unique to them, so we have to kind of remember that. Definitely have to remember that. I have to remind myself of that all the time, because sometimes I'll look at someone like, why don't you want to change? Like, why aren't you changing? Why aren't you taking action? And we have to have empathy, because having no motivation or having low self-esteem, that's hard and that's painful. I've been there, so I completely understand where they're coming from. You have to kind of remind yourself of that. Not everyone's ready when you're ready. So anyways, back to my old friend. Basically, after I would hang out with them, I would just, like I said, they weren't a bad person, but I would just feel down. I wouldn't feel good about myself. And I would feel like, why don't I have healthier people in my life? Like, why do I feel like shit after hanging out with people? I don't feel like that's the way you should feel after hanging out with a best friend. So over time, the way I effectively solved this problem was basically to write it out. And I asked myself, why do I keep allowing this person to share my energy when I know that a strong, confident person is extremely selective with who they allow in their circle, with who they allow to share their energy? If I want to be a strong person and I want to grow and I want to just be more confident, why would I continue to hang out with someone that I knew wasn't serving me right? I had to really break it down. It took a little bit of time to get over that hump, but I had to be realistic with myself, and that's what helped. Who taught me to pick good friends? Who taught that to me? Nobody taught it to me. I had to learn myself how to be selective. My mom, my dad never sat me down and said, you know, listen, when you're hanging out with someone, make sure they're this way or that way. And it's not their fault either, because who taught them? We're taught things and then we teach our children things, but you know, we're not perfect. We're all adults we're all human at the end of the day. So ultimately what I did, I wrote it all down, and what it all boiled down to at the end of the list was that I had a lack of self-love and a lack of self-trust and a lack of confidence. So from there, I finally have the reason why, and I understand why I'm allowing this person to be in my life. And so the next step is action plan. So what am I gonna do to make sure that this doesn't happen anymore? What I learned is ultimately you need to be the CEO of your own life. Period. You need to be the CEO of your own life. And I'm gonna put it to you in a way that you're gonna probably be like, wait, what? I never even thought of it like that. Let me put it like this. You go to your job every single day and you work your ass off, and unless you love your job, you have days where you don't want to do it. So when you tell somebody that they need to be the CEO of their own lives, a lot of times I think what I went through and what a lot of people go through is that they say they're not motivated. Motivation honestly is overrated, and let me break this down for you. You go to work every single day and work your ass off for someone else's dream. Where if you work at McDonald's and you hate your job or whatever the case may be, someone else had a vision that they would have people working in their company, and you're fulfilling that vision that they have. But what about the vision of your own life? Why when we're not motivated, we still make sure that we go to work and we still make sure that we do things for someone else's dream, but we never really do that for ourselves? Isn't that crazy? We can say that we're not motivated to better ourselves, to get up, to go to the gym, or to go out and read a book. But you're not motivated to go to work all the time unless you absolutely love your job. You're not motivated to go to work all the time, but you still make sure it happens. Why are we conditioned that way? Well, honestly, it's because of school. It's because we're taught to ask to go to the bathroom. We're taught to ask for anything. We're taught to bow down to authority. So it's ingrained in us, and that's a whole separate video. That's something that we're not really gonna get into here, because this video will be an hour long. But yeah, think about it that way. Do you complain probably when you don't want to go to work, but you still go, right? So why aren't you going to work for your own life? Why aren't you being the CEO of your own life? When I put it that way, instantly I start to think like, no. I'm not gonna die and say that I worked so hard on someone else's dream and never really pursued mine, didn't even try. No, when you think about it that way, it's like, no. You're gonna do something for you, sir. Your boss expects you to do exactly what he expects you to do. You don't tell your boss, I'm a little bit lazy today, I'm gonna do half of it and then I'll finish the rest tomorrow. No, that's not how this works. You don't do that. But that's why I say that motivation is overrated, because sometimes you need to stop waiting for motivation. Sometimes motivation comes from action. Sometimes motivation comes from activation energy, which means doing something, starting a small task, and using the energy of already starting that task to do more than what you intended to do. Sometimes you need to just get up and do something. You can't wait for motivation. Maybe count from 5 down and just say, I'm not motivated, but at 1, I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna do what I gotta do. I'm gonna start it. The motivation needs to come from the fact that you are the CEO of your life. That's where it comes from. Sometimes you'll be motivated, sometimes you won't. To be completely real and honest with you guys and open, I wasn't the most motivated today to make this video, but I knew that future me would be happy with present me. I knew that someone out there needs to see this video and needs to see things differently. So by being the CEO of your own life, this is piggybacking off of what I said from my last video, my last Superpower Saturday video. This is how you build self-trust. This is how you trust yourself to do what's right. Discipline is a secret to happiness. Another way to be the CEO of your life is to kind of remind yourself of this. Too often we are so completely consumed by what other people are gonna think before we do something. Are your coworkers gonna think this when you post this? Is your mom gonna think this when you post this? If you take any action and before taking it, think about how someone else is gonna react, that is a problem. That is a self-esteem issue. That is something that you need to try to work towards fixing. Understand that when you think like that, when you think I'm not gonna post something because someone else is gonna see it, or if you don't speak up when someone says something that you know is wrong, understand that in a sense, that person wins. You maybe didn't have to argue. You can say like, oh, I didn't have to argue with anyone, there was no confrontation, but at the end of the day, what you're telling yourself subliminally is that your morals don't really matter to you. If I know that someone says something that I don't agree with and it goes against my moral code, I'm gonna speak up because that is self-love. I don't care how that person's gonna feel about me speaking up. At the end of the day, they said what they said, they did what they did, and it made me feel a type of way. I'm gonna speak up against it, of course. So yeah, when you don't speak up, you're telling yourself that your voice doesn't really matter, and then you feel down about yourself. And that's when the negative self-talk begins. Do you see the pattern? You give up your power and then you hate yourself for it. Self-love, self-evolution, growth is a practice. This is not something that you get and it's like, oop, I got happiness, now I'm good for life. Oop, I never have to worry about that again. No, this is something that you have to do every single day. It's something that you have to work towards every single day. It's your mentality. I mean, maybe there's cartoons that are always happy. Maybe Santa Claus, because all he has to do is ride his reindeer and throw toys down chimneys and he's Gucci. But that's not real life. We don't just stay happy for life. We go through shit. But the difference between someone who pursues happiness, who works towards it every day, and someone who doesn't, someone like myself realizes that something isn't making them happy, they see it differently. They're like, okay, what are we gonna do to work to change this? I've noticed that the most happy people, people that I look at and I'm like, wow, they look like they're really happy and they're enjoying life, including myself, they're just more conscious. Those people are just more conscious. They're looking at things from the outside looking in all the time. They're not just going and letting life lead their emotions. They're saying, okay, how does this make me feel and should I continue? They are continuously being the CEO of their lives. That is a happy person, that really is. For me, I take a look at what's happening around me all the time. I'll be in with a group of friends and I'm thinking about things and I'm thinking about the things that people are saying, and naturally, honestly, this isn't something that I'm going for. Just with practice and bettering myself and looking at the way human beings interact with each other, I'm continuously noticing little things between people, and they don't know it. Like, I'm not gonna say it unless I have to check someone, which has happened before, but not often, if I feel disrespected anyways. But yeah, that's what I noticed. Conscious people that are conscious are usually happier. Now let's get into sympathy. Super important. Sympathy. Whether you're at the beginning of your self-love journey or you're, somewhere in the middle or whatever the case may be, of course you're gonna mess up. You're always going to mess up. I mess up every single day. I do things where I'm like, maybe I should have done this a little bit differently. The difference between me, someone who's conscious, and someone who's not, is I have a dialogue with myself so that I can better myself for the future. Like I said before, I write it down. What went wrong? How did I allow this to happen? How can I make sure that this never happens again? I allow myself to be human and make mistakes. It is dangerous and it's self-destructive to set the bar so high for yourself when you're just starting out. You need to understand and believe in your core and in your gut that it is okay to mess up. That doesn't mean you don't check yourself. It just means that you create boundaries to make sure that these things that you've done or anything that you feel down about just doesn't happen again. It means you love yourself enough to say, okay, well, let's try again. I used to be so hard on myself without looking at the whole circumstances. Sometimes I still do this because I do set the bar high for myself, because I do expect myself to continuously grow and be better, which you should. But, sometimes I still have to check myself, but it used to be really bad. And I used to have to sit down and be like, dude, look at the circumstances. Look at your life. Look at the things that occurred when you were in middle school, when you were a toddler, when you were a teenager, that caused you to be this way. You didn't ask to have these qualities. You didn't ask to go through this. You learned it. You're not born learning how to do self-destructive things and hang out with people that are not lifting you up. A lot of what we go through as adults has to do with our childhood, honestly. And I encourage you to think about it. Think back to your childhood. How were your parents? Who were the role models in your life? Who was your spiritual leader? Who taught you to sit down and pray to God or not pray to God? Who taught you to be religious or not be religious? All of that plays a huge part into who you are as an adult, 100%. That helped mold you. So you have to be conscious enough to look back and think like, okay, so is this because of this? The way I am today, is that stemming from this part of my childhood? I want to end the video on this note. So people always say, and it can sound a little played out, to love yourself. And people think that that means to look in the mirror and say, I love you, you are beautiful. maybe that's part of it, maybe that works for some people. But people say to love yourself, but they never tell you why it's important to love yourself. Like, why doesn't anyone ever say it's love yourself because? It's always just love yourself. It's important to love yourself because what do you do to the things that you hate? You are destructive towards them, you avoid them, you talk negatively about them, you think they suck, they're at the bottom of your list of things to do and to prioritize. So if you don't value what's going on inside of you or the people that are around you, what are you subliminally telling yourself? This is why I have a morning routine. This is why I dedicate the first hour of the day to myself, to bettering myself, to nurturing my body, to nurturing my mind, my soul, my spirituality, my peacefulness. Because no matter how many mistakes that I make today, whatever happens that wasn't supposed to happen, I can at least say that when I woke up today, I prioritized myself. I drank water, I did push-ups, I went for a walk, I read a book, I wrote things down, I listed what I was grateful for. I did the things that are in my morning routine. At the end of the day, I still prioritize myself, and that's a bit of self-trust. I can trust that every single morning I'm gonna start the day dedicated to me. Again, the happiest people are conscious about what's coming their way, and they choose happiness by taking action every day and choosing to do what's right and what will make them feel good later. Clean up the bullshit in your life and watch that shit dramatically change. Doesn't mean that negative shit won't come your way, but it means that when it does come your way, you'll be in a place of power and you'll be able to handle it differently than someone who's lost and who's getting their happiness from outside sources. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching, for subscribing. It's crazy, from my first video, the Ancestry DNA test results video, to now, so I was just 2 videos in, this is my 3rd video. I've already gained like over 100 subscribers and you guys have been super awesome. Thank you so much for that. So yeah, thumbs up, subscribe, leave comments. I'm open to feedback, and I really, my hope for you guys, for anyone who's watching this who wants to change, is that you take action to make that happen every single day, because prioritizing yourself, loving yourself effectively allows you to love other people. And I really think that that's how you change the world. Peace, love, and blessings.